Why is there such a huge gap between what we think parenting is going to be and what it actually is?
We had always in our lives, when something had been hard, just, studied it more, worked harder, thought around it, tried something different, studied it even more.
Why, when we have children, do we think it's going to bring us closer together, but often it really pushes us apart? What are the jobs of mums and dads now?
In a lot of senses, your kids don't need as much as you think they do. They don't need you to have read 10 books.
What's a dad when we're no longer just providers? What's a mum when they often are?
Any image I had created in my head about being a mother revolved around breastfeeding.
What am I supposed to teach or model for my children when I've no idea what the world is going to look like in 5 years' time?
We want both of our children to have 2 secure attachments, not just one. One is what I had, one is what he had.
Why did my parents seem to have loads of conviction about these things and I had absolutely none? In this podcast, I talk with experts from all around the world about these problems and hopefully get some wisdom, some insight, and maybe most importantly, some perspective, and find out what it takes to be a happier parent. Rose Stokes is a journalist, a columnist for Women's Health and the Metro. She is someone who has written and thought about motherhood a lot. In this conversation, she shares with me her personal story of just how psychologically damaging the ideals around natural motherhood can be. We talk about support, what it means, what it actually looks like within the really difficult moments of parenting. And she was at pains to tell me that she does not have a perfect relationship, but I found so many moments in this conversation where I was like, I wish I'd taken that approach with my wife. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. You have written extensively about motherhood. You've obviously done loads of research. You've thought about it really deeply. I'm going to ask you to try and go back 3.5 years to a younger Rose Stokes with a newborn. And all her kind of ideals and fantasies about motherhood. And what would you have told her? And would she have been able to listen?
Yeah, no, not really. I don't think I could have. I mean, people do, don't they? They try and prepare you. But the reason that I've stopped doing that to pregnant people is because I'm just a firm believer that you don't get it until you get it. And then from the point that you understand, then you're starting from zero learning. And it just is something that you get better at understanding by the day. And you get better at understanding where, I don't know, the kind of parent you'll be. It's a long thinking process. Also, it's a long sort of process, I think, forming a new identity. And so I did a piece when I was pregnant about how everyone kept telling me horror stories about having children and how it was making me more anxious as I was pregnant. And I stand by that, because at the time, after a while, I was like, God, what a moron. When I had the baby, I was like, now I get it. Now I understand why they all kept doing that. But now I'm like, it doesn't what value is there in scaring people? Because they cannot understand until they have a child the level of responsibility and that thing. I think for me, there was a very clear moment where the penny dropped that this was my life now and there's no going back. And just simple things like wanting to go out of the house or to do anything on my own had to be negotiated from now on. And that even if I was sick, even if I was tired, even if I was having a panic attack, if my child needed something, they were the priority. I just couldn't have properly digested it, I don't think, until I was in that moment and I was like, wait, why am I in charge? So yeah, I think if I did say anything to her, to my former self, it would be, it's going to get messy and then it's going to get better. And you just got to trust that, and be patient, really. because the parent that you are to the first child, the parent you are to both children once the second one arrives, like this constantly in flux. And and all of the things I imagined I would be as a mother are totally different and I still feel like I'm still developing like what kind of mother I feel, or I don't even know what kind of mother, because I don't really believe there are types, but like, the different sort of where the edges of my motherhood are. I'd never would have listened or really been able to understand at the time, but like giving myself patience and trying to drop the perfectionism would have been useful, but I'm still sure that I don't think I was there. I don't think mentally I was there.
I mean, that's the thing for me that jumps out as a common thread in your writing, that I mean, maybe I'm being overly optimistic. I think we can take that message on, because I think what you do beautifully is you take these things that live as assumptions in our head and you make them explicit on the page, and then you challenge them. So the first one the first piece of writing I read by you, this was years ago, was, about you. I think you were in therapy, basically talking about these ideas you have about being a natural mother, and your therapist saying, sorry, this sounds like a lot like you're saying perfect mother with all
Yeah,
these
yeah, yeah, yeah.
all these suppositions. And
Yeah. I think for me, like that, like for better or for worse, that big shock came for me very quickly with my baby, because the breastfeeding thing, like, and I talk about it all the time, but for me, it was huge. It was huge. Like all of my, like, any image I had created in my head about being a mother revolved around breastfeeding. And I had just never considered that it would, and people had said to me, it's difficult or whatever. I remember like strolling back from one of our last scans and saying to my husband, like, I'm just not worried about the breastfeeding thing. I just think it's going to work. And like being like, wow, the humble pie. And like we both, my husband got as obsessive about it as I did, because we were both like, no, we went into it both like, I guess we were 34, 35. We had always in our lives, when something had been hard, just, studied it more, worked harder, like thought around it, tried something different, like studied it even more, like, and breastfeeding was the first thing that I was like, I just don't think it's going to work. Like, and I really did try everything. But, people talk a lot about the shattering of your identity when you become a mother and like, or a parent. But I do think I think it's a different path for men, but I'll go into that later. And like, probably our situation is relevant in that case. But like, for me, it was like immediate, whoa, who am I? And then this sort of like, well, how can I be a mother if I don't breastfeed? And like, what am I to my child? If everyone else can feed my child with a bottle, then why am I special? Why am I different? Like, why am I? And if we're like reducing gender roles down to like, we're trying to break down this idea that women are the caring ones and men aren't and whatever, then I was like, well, then we're just like two like same people to this child. A real loss of like, wow, I'm not special, because we're both doing it, and everything that I'm doing, he's doing too. And like, yeah, obviously I grew him, like I grew the baby and I birthed the baby. But at that point I was like, well, he can feed him. Therefore, people would say to me, oh, it's so great. You can go out, you can do stuff without the baby. But like, I didn't let myself, because the whole time I was like, yeah, but if breastfeeding had worked, then I wouldn't be able to do that. So I shouldn't be able to do that. And my husband would be like, why don't you go? And I'd be like, no, I can't. Like, I don't know. It's so, and these are all sort of inherited ideas. Like, everyone I'd known that was a mother couldn't leave their baby because they were breastfeeding. And I was like, well, I'm not going to leave my baby just because I'm not breastfeeding them. And obviously, like, one of the things that people drum into your head when you have a baby and you're trying to breastfeed is like how important it is for your bonding. So I was then like, what if we don't bond? So there was just like a lot going on with that. And I remember my best friend coming to visit at like 3 months. And I was like, I just don't know if I'm doing this right, if I'm a natural mother, if I'm like, and she was like, I don't understand what you mean. Like, you're his mother. Like, and I was just obsessed with it. And like, really, it wasn't until I'd say just before I got pregnant with the second one, I started feeling more confident in like, okay, no, because also there's that, a lot of it is when you're thinking too much around something and you're reading everything online and you're following all these people and you're reading books or whatever, I sort of had this idea that there was a correct way that I was supposed to mother, and there's all these scripts, and I'm supposed to be able to know how to say them in the moment, and I'm supposed to act in this way at all times, and I'm supposed to be there on these occasions. Like, it was all very like, there was no flex, and I didn't have the confidence to be like, if I step back for half a day and go and do something for myself, like, this child's still going to love me. Like, and so, yeah, there was like a lot of that. I think I wonder if breastfeeding had worked, whether I'd have picked apart. I mean, obviously I'd have struggled in different ways because, yeah, my baby would have needed me more. And, but I think because I was on mat leave and I was like, well, I don't really get what's special about me because, just put the like formula in the bottle and anyone can give it to him. And like, so why am I more? Like, why am I different? Do you know what I mean? Like, it just was so crushing for me. And like, really, I was having to build an idea of motherhood. It's so funny because I'd never really thought about it. And also part of it is because my mum had exclusively breastfed all of us. But yeah, I just found it really hard. And I still, like, I've said, and I've often said, and I will say it, I will never, ever experience grief like that, like, ever again in my life. Like, I don't think it will ever leave me. Just this feeling of like, I remember just saying to everyone, like, what am I? If I can't breastfeed him, how can I be his mother? Like, how can I, what am I to him? Like, I just couldn't. And yeah, so that's a very long version of this whole natural mother thing that pervades, this sort of, it does definitely pervade, like, for women, this idea that, people will say to you, you're holding a baby and someone will come up and go, oh, you're a natural, and I have always been quote unquote maternal, whatever that means, like, and, when my best friend had kids, like, I was very there and like very involved, and I loved babies and I loved children. So when it came to me, I was like, wow, it's almost the pressure I put on myself. I was like, oh, well, I'm maternal, so this must be automatic because people say, oh, you're a natural mother. Like, and it's just such bullshit. Like, there isn't a natural mother. How do you know how to do something? Like, yeah, when we lived in communities, it wouldn't have been the first newborn I'd spent that amount of time with. Like, and yeah, you're in such a vulnerable, like, learning space. But you're holding so much expectation, not just your own that is created by the society and the sort of whatever, but also, people around you are expecting you to be able to know what you're doing. So, and it just all felt very like, I was just so ashamed that everyone was seeing me fail at something as well. And every time I had to feed him in public, I was just like, oh, like, I didn't want people to see that I had failed at something. It's yeah, there's so much to it, but like, for me, fundamentally, it was about breastfeeding, or rather, breastfeeding was the, like, the
litmus test of motherhood.
For me, it really was. It was like such an early thing to feel like I'd failed at. Like, if that had worked, then maybe it would have been like, I'd have been like, okay, I know what I'm doing. Okay, I'm feeding him. And then we'd have got to weaning. And
I mean, I guess for some people, the failure starts even earlier. We've all done the NCT. We've all done the hypnobirthing. There'll be no drugs. And women are made to feel like they've failed when that isn't the case. Like the very, very first moments can feel like a failure.
Oh my God. I remember I had a really good friend in London who was in our bump and baby group. And I was trying to talk to her about it, and I was talking to her about it, and she was like, you know, everything you're saying is exactly how I feel about my birth. And I was like, yeah. So it's like she had a cesarean, she didn't want one, and she has always felt like she felt that at the beginning she failed from the beginning because she didn't birth correctly. And I'm lucky because my births went well. So and when I say well, I mean went in the way I wanted and hoped for it. There's so many parts to it, right?
I just want to ask you two things just on that beautifully told, heartbreaking story of grief, right? You said early on there that your husband had got obsessive with you.
Yeah.
Which I think strikes me as a great way to deal with it. I think often what we do as men, maybe as partners, maybe this isn't gendered, but we try and be compensatory. It's like, you're incredibly stressed about this thing. I can see you're incredibly stressed about it. I'm going to be like, it doesn't really matter. It's not that important. I'm going to try and think of, and basically what I end up doing is proving to you that you're the only person who gives a shit. And like further, it's isolating for both. What can partners do? I'm thinking about the breastfeeding thing, right? Where, you know,
Yeah.
like I think men are like, look, it's fine, we can have a bottle, which makes women very angry sometimes. But also, you know, you wrote about a year ago about getting really obsessed with like your kids' milestones. And I just, again, in that circumstance, I could just think of men being like, don't worry about it, like, he's going to be able to roll.
Yeah.
Like, but it's
No,
not, but what's the right move for us there?
I am so lucky in a way, although I think it probably sends us both down the wrong path sometimes. But like my partner does get it. He did get it. Like he really got it. And he was like, I imagine if I was in the same boat, I would feel the same way. And, you know, he'd had women breastfeeding around him too. So he had his own expectations and he could see how much I was hurting and he just wanted it to stop. Like, but he knew that asking me to stop. And in the end, he sort of did, actually. He didn't really ask me to stop, but he sort of said, it's okay if you do. So for me, it was really, I mean, I never in any part of the journey with it felt like my husband didn't see me. Like I felt like he got it. And he really did hold, like, in you know, rather than saying, this is ridiculous, he was more like, you know, I want my wife, you know, back or not back, or like, you know, I see you're hurting. I want you to not hurt. Like he will be okay. Like we will be okay. And I think he just wanted me to feel comfortable enough to let go. Like, but it's an impossible, like, you know, I do think in that situation, it's a very, very, and I like a very difficult, line to tread, because the reality is that my feelings on it was changing all the time too. So sometimes I wanted him to say, go on, girl, like, keep going, you've got this. And sometimes I wanted him to say, it's fine, it's okay, right? Which is hard and so I sort of get back to, especially with the hormones, my God, like I can't even tell you like how different I thought about things from like Monday to Friday to Saturday to Sunday. Or maybe he'd come, like we always did shifts at the beginning. It was very like one of us slept in the room with the baby, feed, other one swap over so that we'd manage to get some sleep. And he'd come in and he'd be like, have you slept at all? And I'd be like, no. And it would be like, right, okay. So I think he could see me sort of slipping away. And it was really difficult, but I think he spoke to my best friend and like they just sort of, between them, tried to help. They were trying to help me accept it, I guess. And actually with my first, I stopped and it was all very dramatic and I cried and cried for days and days and days. And then I just started again.
You stopped what?
And
Sorry,
stop
trying to
breastfeeding
breastfeed.
for me. Yeah. Like when my son was like 3 months or something, I was like, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore. And then a couple of days later, someone was like, why don't you just do it? But like, that's not his food. That's just something that you guys do for like, comfort or. So we did that until he was 7 or 8 months, actually. It was really nice. It's quite an expansive conversation. So I'll try and be a little bit more condensed, but essentially, like, it was really important to me that my grief was seen and that it wasn't just like, look, he likes drinking formula, let's just do that. And I would have found it really hard, by the way, as well, if he'd have come at me with loads of studies saying, look, formula's fine, don't worry about it. Like it was a really tough time for both of us, but communication, I think, and like from his side, just constantly checking
But
in with.
it feels like a lot of what women want in those periods, like there's no way out for you. And actually, maybe the worst thing we can do as men is be like, show ways out that we can see. It's like you were suffering and he suffered a bit with you, which as I get older, I realize is basically relationship. There's no good days for me and bad days for my wife or vice versa. It's like if things are going really badly for her, right, we just need to suffer together a bit. Like, and stop trying to sort of seesaw, which I don't know why we think that's the answer, but we really do.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think what's interesting actually is, so I suffered with the first quite a lot, but with the second, my husband found the transition from 1 to 2 quite hard. And he was struggling with that, like, a lot. And I just have this sort of theory that, and like proven or unproven, I don't know, but like that with the men, with the first child, they still get to keep a semblance of like life before, right? Because so for me, it was like I wasn't working. I was all day like caring for a baby, and he would come home and he'd hang out with the baby. We'd do the nights, but in the weekend he'd be there. And he's always done a 4-day working week, by the way. So he has the kids one day. And but when we shifted to having our second baby, anytime, like, I was with the baby all the time doing like breastfeeding and stuff, and then he had to look after the toddler, so he lost that respite to, or like that feeling like he had, like, he could escape a bit, or
Mm.
and he struggled a lot with that, and like it took us quite a lot of work to get him to a place where he felt a bit more, I'm not saying control, but a bit more comfortable with the fact that, like, yeah, life was sort of like, as we knew it, was kind of not gone, but like for a little while. And we want to have
That in a way sounds like it's really good for your relationship, because I
yeah,
think about, like, there's a bit in Fair Play where basically Eve Rodsky rolls over in bed and she's like, has to get up to go and get the kid. And she's like, thanks a lot, asshole. And she's basically saying, I'm just really angry that he still gets to be him.
yeah,
And I think there's loads of the outrage is that actually, if men don't, and I didn't at the time, if they don't lean in and actively decide to change, we can carry on with our bodies unchanged, our brains unchanged, our careers unchanged. Like, we can be
yeah.
unaffected by fatherhood, whereas you have no choice.
I would say now, like, whatever I feared. So the big challenge for us actually has been that, like, we came into this being like, we want to be equal, like parents, like we want to really try and he is so good on the emotional labor stuff. Like, I don't want to, like, be like, oh, he's so great, but for doing what I do. But he is like, he knows stuff without me having to tell him, and like, but really genuinely do think he has changed a lot, and he has grown a lot into parenthood. And his thing was really like, he's always been like the fun uncle, the fun guy that like all the kids wanted to play with, because he's so good in like his imagination and he's so good at playing. And that's one part where he really excels, and we sort of complement each other in that way. Like, but like for me, there was a real like, okay, but I have to, honestly, often I have to remind myself, like, what is it that we're aiming for? And it is, we want both of our children to have 2 secure attachments, not just one. Like, one is what I had, one is what he had, and so in order to do that, like, yes, he needs to step up a bit, like, in comparison to maybe other men, but also I need to let him. So that has been my big learning, has been like trying to not be involved in everything, trying to like feel confident as a mother without being like the one that they always run to, or the one that they always want, or the one that they always like this and that, like, because he can't raise his like status as a father if I'm up here, right? I have to come, like, not that, you know, the kids are getting less, but, you know, ultimately it does take a bit of, you know, maneuvering. And so and it's been tough on my ego, precisely this natural mother thing that just comes up all the time. But yeah, so it's interesting from that point of view. But I think in terms of I think,
But I mean, I think what also, you know, nature runs on efficiency, right?
yeah.
If children know they're going to get the care from one person every time, they will continue. They will always go to that person. It's really hard for us to kind of like preempt and do things while someone else is doing it. Like, it's just like there's a kind of, well, why would you? And I know that's
Yeah, of
desperately
course.
unfair. I do
And
know
also,
that,
like,
but
I have to challenge myself with it too. Like, currently our eldest one keeps waking up because he's having night meadows, he calls them. And like my
nightmare what?
husband, night meadows.
Nightmare.
And my husband has been the one that takes him back because he's better boundaried. So I'm bad because, well, no, I'm not bad, like it's just whatever, but I'll always like get in the bed, snuggle, fall asleep, whatever. And that we found just with our son, like this is just our experience. I'm not trying to, you know, say that this is the best way, but we found that the more that happens, the more he wakes up, and then it's sort of, and so my husband's better able to, you know, give him a cuddle, put him back to bed, and then just sit there till he falls asleep and then leave. But I was on the edge of saying to him, okay, why don't we go back to like, I deal with the baby at night and you deal with the toddler. And then I was like, no, because I'm de-skilling myself. Like we are better when we push ourselves to do the thing that we feel less confident in.
Sounds slightly masochistic. Like, I think I'll be terrible at that. I'll do that one.
No, but also it's like, because I know, so what we did learn, he was on pat leave for like 7 weeks with the first one. And what I found was, because he was around helping with everything, I didn't feel confident doing it on my own. And then when he went back to work, it was even hard. Like, I don't even know, it felt really hard. It always feels hard, of course it does. But I was like, but I've not done the nappies, or I haven't done this, or like whatever, like things. He was doing one thing, so I just never want to feel like there's an area where I don't feel confident in with parenting. And I think he's the same. Like, he's like, I want to know that, you know, if you were away for a night, I could do that, and it wouldn't be. And
Yeah, I've got friends and they're both freelance and they both travel. And actually their sort of relationship is really good as a result, because they both have to be able to do all the stuff,
everything.
because a lot of the time it's just one of them. And
Yeah.
it
And
seems
like,
to work really well.
obviously we're always going to have like you know, sometimes like our eldest quite often is like, oh, I want a cuddle with mummy or whatever, but actually quite often just want a cuddle with daddy. But like, you know, daddy's definitely his favorite playmate, and because I just can't get there, like the level of imagination that they get to. But you know, I do play with him, and it's not so there's sort of accepting our strengths and also not de-skilling ourselves by just not doing everything. And also for me,
I think it
that's
is really interesting, that imaginative play thing, because particularly,
yeah.
you know, now we've got Bluey, but I think that for always, it's not always, sorry, certainly for, you know, I was born in 1981. That is what I came into fatherhood with. That's what a good dad
Yeah.
is. It's on the dad ideals, and it's not actually on the mum ideals list.
No.
Like, you know, you've got to be everything. You've got to be self-sacrifice. You've got to do all these terrible things. But actually, playing with them and messing around with them isn't actually on that list. It's quite interesting.
It's true, and it's so funny because like me and all of my female friends are always like, oh god, imaginative play, and like it's weird. I just like my husband really enjoys it, so and it is something that I need to sort of challenge myself on. But like honestly, I just don't. I find it really, really hard, and like every single one of my female friends is like, because when your kids get to a certain age, it stops being like, like moving toys around, and it starts being like, you're a sea monster. Well, and like our son has got a really strong imagination, so like he's always wanting to play. It started with like every morning he used to cast us in a role. It was like, today you are, Captain Barnacles, and I'm whatever. And so he really loves that stuff. And like yesterday he was like, I'm the Hulk, mummy. And like, it's funny because I just couldn't, like, my husband will literally spend like an hour playing with him in this like imagination zone. I just couldn't do it. I wouldn't know how to do it.
So it's really making me laugh because it's making me think of my wife. Like, I'm the Hulk, mummy. Oh, okay.
Yeah, enjoy.
Please, yeah. Carry on with your day, Hulk.
Right? Like the only way that I engage with it is that I've managed to start feeding him green food and calling it Hulk. So, like,
it's not bad.
stuff like that.
But it's interesting you've gone to food because I'm Eloise saying to me being like, look, trying to find this kind of way of saying you're overthinking stuff without it kind of causing, but without it just being really annoying and basically flagging up that I'm not thinking about stuff at all. But her being like, these are my ways of showing love because, like, I don't play with them like you play with them. This is my way of kind of showing love to them. That was when we were being nice to each other, not fighting. But I thought that was
funny because it's like very current in our household, because literally this week I was like, because I then always feel like on the days then where they're with me, if I haven't like played with them enough, like that my husband's going to be like, when you didn't play anything? Or like, and also because our second child was like, I mean, he's starting to get a bit spicy now, but he has been real, just like leave him on his own. He's pretty happy. And so I feel guilt. I feel like that's a expectation I'm not living up to, because like, he's like, well, daddy's really fun and daddy will play with me. Like, what, like, will you? But then I also started to think, God, I don't know if I want him to be the kind of person that thinks that he needs other people around to entertain him all the time. And actually, maybe it's good that he has a balance. Like, maybe it is actually like, yes, we should fight back against these, like, restrictive gender norms. And maybe you have a mum that's more into imagination play and a dad that isn't. But actually, the fact that there's both of us is good, because with me, he does more of the sort of creative, like arty, different, like more fun in reality. And with his dad, he's more like
without diminishing your husband's stupid world.
No, I mean, I love it, and honestly, I can't even tell you, when we had our first son, all of his nieces and nephews were like legitimately heartbroken, because the first time they saw us, they met the baby and they were like, oh, cute, and they were like, right, Uncle Simon. And he was like, I can't. Like, I'm busy. I've got the baby. And they were so sad. Honestly, they were like, oh, but Uncle Simon's the one that plays with us. Like, what? Like, they really were so sad. So, I think there's so much value. And I am so glad that my children have that, and that they have, all of this amazing play, and they have such a fun dad that, like, a fun boundary dad. Like, he also, he's a parent. He's a good parent.
You raised that point earlier that, had we all grown up in a community, that this wouldn't have been your first time with really young babies. And, a lot of your writing, I would say, is basically about the danger of the amount of information which is accessible, the danger of the tribalism that always seems to come out of that on social media. Like, like, where's the education, like, that where can it live without it kind of resulting in guilt?
Good question. So it's funny because I'm also sort of going through a process of trying to be less online. And like it's true. The reality is in a lot of senses, like your kids don't need as much as you think they do. Like they don't need you to have read like 10 books on how to like yes, there are like one of the things that I think with this, one of the things, the problems I have with this like onslaught of information is that it leads you to believe that there is a way to do parenting and that there's a correct way and there's an incorrect way, or you have to find your way and all the other ways are wrong, and like that there is an answer for everything. And the uncomfortable truth that I have found in parenting is that some things can't be solved, some things you live with, sometimes you don't know and you work it out, sometimes you're learning together, like with your child. Like I definitely know with my eldest, I really feel like we're constantly flying into new territory. That I'm like, okay, this is new. We haven't, like this morning, he was like, we used the word hate for the first time over breakfast. And I was like, oh, where have you learned that word?
Was it I hate green food?
He said, he said,
thus ending your contribution
yeah,
to
he said,
imaginative.
hate is a feeling, and it's when you're sad, people hate you. And I was like, wait. And obviously we have to go in and like sort of check this stuff, and just feeling like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. For me, parenting got so much better when I trusted that given the like, you know, very well-rounded education I've had as a human being in terms of values, experiences, empathy, like intellect, like all of those things, trusting that I would probably do all right with like if I just improvise, that the improvising is probably fine. And actually one thing I've noticed is I used to find all that like gentle parenting, I used to follow all of it. And then I'd get to the stage where my husband and when my kids having really, like, you know, really challenging behavior, and I'd be like, right, what was it I was supposed to say? Okay. And it's like almost like trying to memorize a script, right? But in doing so, I'm leaving the present moment. I'm not there with the child that needs me because I'm in my head being like, right, was it validate? And actually I just threw it all out
And then
the
they're
window.
not your
And
words.
then
That's not mummy.
I noticed recently when I thought, I was watching some video that was like, oh, you know, you have to regulate your child or whatever. And I was like, oh, I just do that. And not because I've read it, but because that's the way that I feel is right to respond to my child. So I think it's, you know, don't underestimate the power of your instinct.
The reason I find that tricky, and I completely agree with you, and I think it's one of the reasons that actually at this moment in time, not biologically, but at this moment in time, being a dad is easier and more enjoyable because no one's drilled all these messages at us. They've not been aimed at us about all these different things that we're supposed to do. Otherwise, we're going to kind of traumatize our children for the rest of their lives. So we find it a lot easier just to kind of improvise. Like, it's a lot easier to be like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing as a dad, and be quite open to it. Whereas you're supposed to know. And then I get slightly worried that instinct thing plays into that mums have an instinct and they just know. But actually,
no, I hear what you're saying. My view is that when you're every baby you have, people think that parenting is this whole like new thing, and I guess it is. But like, you've done relationships before, right? Like, we can't get to the age of having a child without having ever had a relationship with anyone. And each child we have to make a relationship with that child. And the relationship we have with our first child is not going to be the same as the relationship we'd have with our second child. And so I don't mean instinct, like as a sort of natural maternal instinct. I mean the instinct you grow and develop on how to parent your child from parenting your child.
From having had a relationship with that person.
Yeah, and that's learned, that's skills. Like ultimately, I think that parenting is a skill that we learn. And I feel so much more confident with my youngest in places that I didn't with my eldest, because I'm just sort of more open to letting that relationship develop. And so when I say instinct, I don't mean like, like some ethereal voice of God in my head being like, Rose, this is the correct way. I mean the learned instinct that you get from parenting your child. I wish that people relied more on that, because any moment you spend in your head in a sort of crisis point with your child, as you said, like, you said the older you get, the more you realize that the best way to be with someone or to help someone is to struggle, or like to be in the struggle with them, or to like feel with them. Like, it's the same with your kid. And anytime you spend like thinking about something that's not right there, you're not with them. So I just feel like we've like this. I see so many parents doubting themselves, and it's obviously something that you see the second time around. I was in a postnatal group with a lot of first time mums, and they were like, right, what's the thing I do in this case, and what do I do in this case? And we somehow, and it's capitalism really, that we've sort of created this idea that there's a product for everything and there's a solution for everything. And I just think that I just wish parents trusted themselves more, lived more in the moment than thinking that there was something that they've missed. And and accepted that, yeah, there's going to be periods in parenting where you don't know what the fuck you're doing, and you're
I'm
like
really sorry.
making it up as you go along. But there's always time to like reset, regroup.
When you were talking about breastfeeding, you're like, you and your husband and everyone believe that if you work harder, you study harder, that you can there's a solution to problems, particularly for women who've been like, if you're diligent in the workplace, you will succeed, as opposed to men can be a bit more risk-takey.
But like, none of that works when you apply it to human beings. And like, diversity, and, we're lucky so far. We haven't had any behavioral problems outside of what, we of our own experiences. Like, I don't think that life prepares us for parenting, because now I think what's happened is that because we've all delayed, I often think now, I sort of wish I'd gone into parenting when I was younger, before I had a career. It's always, I'm not saying that I want to regress back to whatever, but when I was 20, I was so much more instinctive, because that was just how I was, and like I hadn't sort of taught myself out of it and learned to doubt myself. And I also was way more like used to feeling like feeling comfortable with the fact I didn't know things. Like,
Yeah.
like, and like,
Yeah.
literally, because you don't walk around thinking that you should know. Like, at some point you switch from being someone that's asking people about things you don't know about, to feeling like you're supposed to know everything and don't let everyone know that you don't. And if you approach parenting from that position, then it's going to be impossible.
I love that. That's so good.
If you started a degree at university, you wouldn't expect to be able to write a dissertation on day one. You wouldn't expect to, like, if you started training for a marathon, you wouldn't expect to get your PB on day one. It's exactly the same. It's continual learning, and it's getting comfortable with feeling like you don't know what you're doing and not knowing what's right and wrong. And then through like getting through that and surviving, you suddenly realize that actually that's just how it is, and you're getting comfortable with the not knowing of it all.
That's a great message. I just want to okay, two questions. One, you've written a lot about the pressure to bounce back as a mother, like
Yeah.
physically, mentally, personality wise. I'm just like, obviously men don't feel that pressure. I'm just wondering, like, what partners, like, how can a partner's attitude towards that impact that pressure?
Well, again, like weight is a big issue in my relationship, because it's a big issue for me. So whatever is an issue for you, you bring into your relationship, right? And me and my husband are like still figuring out. We have this joke between us that's like, whenever he's being horrible to himself, or like he's going, oh yeah, but I should do this, or I should have like, well, I've put on weight, or I've done this, or whatever. I always say like, hey, leave him alone. He's my husband, or like whatever, and he'll do it to like. And so, okay, after my second child, like I gained a lot of weight. I went through like a period of trying GLP-1s. They didn't agree with me. Had a bit of a difficult mental health patch. Now that our second son is in childcare, the way that my husband is supporting me is by me saying, because we like want to have another baby, hopefully, is me saying, look, I want to get back to my physical, like to where I feel strong, and him supporting me in that. So whether that's encouraging me to go out and exercise, whether it's we've signed up to a PT together, like so we go once a week to a PT. It's like making resource in our family budget so that I can go to therapy, or so that I can get support with my nutrition, and whatever it is. Like there are many ways to support that aren't, I don't fancy you anymore. He's letting me say what I need rather than rather than him telling me what he thinks I need. So like, why don't you just diet, or why don't you just do this, or why don't you whatever, is me having thought about it and been like, okay, I think I need to do Pilates for my back, and I think I need to do this or whatever, and him being like, cool, let's go. Like obviously people don't necessarily have the same resources, so like I'm not saying it has to be stuff that you pay for, but it's just that like support. And like sometimes I hate him for it. Like, yeah, the other day he was like, I'm going to take the kids for an hour so you can go and do the Peloton. And I was like, but I don't want to do the Peloton. But do you know what I mean? Like, it's like he's like, let's go. Like, you said you wanted to do this. And like, actually, it's like having a teammate. And then, he goes on the Peloton and he does it too. It's not like he expects anything from me that he's not doing. Like, so I think, holding in mind that he is also not a perfect person, physically, mentally, whatever person, like understanding that he also has room for improvement, and then we both do it together. So at one point when I was postnatal, so I think you need some support, like you need some therapy. I did it. When he was struggling, I was like, I think you need some therapy. I think that, and then he did it. Like, it's that sort of, being like, I'm not going to ask you to do anything that I wouldn't do myself in the same situation.
That sounds so awesome. I could just really see how that conversation would result in defensiveness. If I were to turn that, in fact, I have turned to my wife and be like, do you not want to go to therapy? And it's like, what did you fucking say?
Well, I think we all both like we had already done therapy before we met each other.
Okay, tell me this stuff before we go. I cannot leave with this fucking perfect relationship hovering over me.
No, I don't know. It's not like that at all. Oh my God,
tell me the stuff you fight about. What do you fight about?
Mate, we've got 2 hours until we go to couples therapy. Like, don't worry about it. Although I have to say, the couples therapy is a preventative measure, and it is what we gifted each other for our 5-year anniversary. So
that's wonderful.
Well, yeah, but I sometimes we go a bit too far on the self-improvement. So like, don't worry about it. What do we fight about? We, like every other couple, we have what I call the race to the bottom, which is when I'll be like, I did this, and then he'll come back and be like, but I did this. So it tends to be household tasks and both of us being hypocrites. So me being like, oh my God, you left the house like in a mess when you were with the kids because you were so busy being fun, you didn't tidy everything up. And then he'll be like, and then, on Tuesday I was with the kids and I was feeling rubbish. So when they went to bed, I just watched straight into bed. I didn't do the clear up. And he's like, wait, hang on a minute. You can't say that, that sort of thing. I call it the race to the bottom because it starts with a, like, me or him suggesting something the other one might do better next time. Other one responding and being like, wait, but I actually did all of these amazing things. And the other one being like, wait, but I did all these amazing things too. And then like we start like itemizing like all of the things that we've done. And, oh, but I do this every week. And, oh, I bet you didn't even notice this. And then we get to the stage where we both hate each other like momentarily. And then we reset. And that is a big challenge of ours. And also I think one of our challenges is, but it's something that we're talking about in therapy, actually. I don't think you'll mind. Is this sort of feeling that like doing one thing to help the other person leaves you indebted, and therefore you then have to make up for it. Like we're both trying to have more flex in like helping each other and not feeling like if we accept help or like whatever. But yeah, I mean we argue. What was the one I like? My favorite one. There was one when the baby was really small and I said something really funny. Oh no. I was like, I'm gonna get angry too because I'm not an anger person. Like I don't get angry. And like there was a time where I was like, I want to be angry, so I'm gonna be angry now. And like and it's like, you know, just like you can't spend that much time with someone else and not like they piss you off. Like but and actually one thing that we do argue about a lot, which I think a lot of couples will, is because I've struggled with my weight all my life and we all come with our own sort of like baggage around food, I didn't realize that when we started feeding our children, we might not necessarily agree on how to deal with fussy eating, like what we do, like what we offer them. Is it okay if they decide to not eat and then they're hungry? Like all of these sorts of things.
That's where all your stuff reveals itself and you're like, oh.
Food and eating was like wild because for me, I'd been to all of this therapy to teach me that food is not bad or wrong, and then some foods aren't better than others, and like we don't pressure people to eat and this and that. And then it's like the reality is you have a child that won't eat anything. Like what are you doing? Are you holding the line? Which like my husband tends to be more like, no, let's hold the line. And I'm like, oh, but he's hungry, or like whatever. So like, you know, those sorts of areas, I would hazard a guess that a lot of people find like, you're like, yeah, we agree. Like you go into parenting, you're like, we're so on the same page. And then you stumble across something that you're like, whoa, or like state school versus public school, or like, I don't know, like whatever it is in your relationship. I want my children to do sports, or I don't want them to do sports, and whatever. There's always something that's like, ooh, interesting.
Yeah. And I didn't realize I cared that much about that thing.
Yeah, and also that I have to, like, a big part of parenting is compromising with the other parent. And actually, like, that was a big lesson for me, like coming in, because I was 35 when we had our first, or 34, and I had been like spent all this time dreaming of having my children, had this massive long list of names that I liked, get pregnant, and he's like, don't like any of them. And I was like, wait, but that's my child's name. Like, I've been dreaming of this my whole life, and having to be like, okay, we have to find a name we both like.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. You can find more about Rose at rosestokes.co.uk, or her Instagram handle is Rose Stokes. Please subscribe to the podcast, and if you're enjoying it, leave me a review. And if you're not enjoying it, just keep it to yourself. I look forward to seeing you all next week.